Yep, it's 9 a.m. on the clock, Europe time, Central European time. So we are gonna kick it off. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to the Xebia Academy webinar week. My name is Wout. I'm the host of the Xebia Academy community, and with me is the good old Carlo Klerk from his home office.
That's right.
All right. We'll just allow everybody to drop in the virtual space before we start. Welcome. It's by far the best presentation title of the full week. Today we're going to listen to security culture. Are you kidding me? That will set the tone probably for the rest of the presentation. For the upcoming hour, we will hand over the mic to Carlo in a minute, and he will do his talk for half an hour up to 45 minutes. Afterwards, we do the Q&A. During Carlos' talk, I won't be online. I'll be listening though, but you won't see or hear me. And I'll pop in again for the Q&A, and I will moderate the questions for Carlo. If you have any questions, even during Carlos' talk, just use the Q&A box for that, please, because then it's easier to moderate. So by the end of the hour, I am pretty sure that you will understand what security culture is, why it is necessary, what good examples are, and also what is in it for you and your fellow employees. Sit back, listen, and take a pencil or pin down the questions in the Q&A box if you have them. And for now, please enjoy Carlo's talk. Carlo, it's yours.
Yes, all right. Well, good morning, everybody. If it's morning at where you're at, welcome and thanks for your interest in security culture. Are you kidding me? And the reason that I'm talking about this in this kind of manner is that I've been in security for about, let's say, 13 years or so. Started off as a penetration tester, but slowly grew towards starting to improve things because the pen test team I was with kept running into like the same problems over and over and over again, everywhere. And it was way back in 2006, 2007, and they were kind of getting demotivated because they wanted new challenges. So I started thinking about how can I get the challenge like better for them? How can I challenge them more? And the only way to do that was to make our customers better. So slowly I moved towards like improving the security posture of my customers so that my pen test team would have a harder time like finding vulnerabilities. And it kind of worked for them, but also for me, because I found out, you know what? I like consultancy. I like improving stuff. So I moved towards that. And I've been at a lot of places in the meantime, focusing on a lot of stuff. Primarily stuff like doing security awareness programs, building internal penetration test teams, building a security operations center, and all kinds of stuff like that. But and also focusing on stuff like secure software development lifecycle and implementing that in the way of working. So I've run into all those topics a couple of times within a lot of companies, and I was able to see like a clear distinction between companies that didn't really have like a security culture and companies that did. And with there's companies obviously that do like security awareness programs that once a year you have to do like an e-learning. That's not really what I meant, but I mean with security culture that security is embedded within every part of the organization where information security is relevant. And that everybody knows what to do and what their role is, or ask questions and challenges stuff that is regarding security. So, and where I've seen that organizations that I've seen that were very mature also had like a mature security culture, and organizations that were still, getting to grips with like security and making like the traditional starter errors and having the same challenges to get better at it, did not really have a security culture. So I started wondering, is not having a security culture the cause of being not mature, or is having a security culture a result of getting more mature? And in my experience, in the end, it's both. If you don't work at your culture, you won't get any better. And if you're doing great, your security culture is probably also good. So let's dive into this and yeah, see what we will find out in this storyline. So I hope everybody can see my screen. I just kind of did this, so I'm going to skip it. So let's look at the aviation industry first, and not necessarily from security, but for safety. Because if y'all could talk now in this chat, and I would ask anybody of you, would safety be relevant in the airline industry or the aviation industry? Everybody would say yes, and I'm guessing, everybody would understand why, because the result of safety issues in the airline industry paints like a clear mental picture what could go wrong. And sadly, over the years, we've had plenty of examples of where it went wrong, because the results are catastrophic, and it creates like a lot of misery, physical damage to people, or even death. So the risks of aviation and why safety is important are very clear. So if you go look at the aviation industry, they have a very, very explicit safety culture. Safety is everything. For most airlines I've ever reached out to, have been in contact with, well, every airline I've been in contact with, safety is priority number one. And if you talk like to a head of operations or flight operations, if he has to choose between, losing like a ton of money or bringing an aircraft home safely, he will choose bringing the aircraft home safely, because the ton of money is irrelevant regarding to the safety of everybody on board. So a lot of effort is spent into promoting safety, having people like safety at the front of their mind, and working at that. It even goes as far that if one of these planes that you see in this picture has like a technical problem, like metal fatigue or a tiny hair cracks in part of the wing or the engine, something like that, it goes into a system and it's sent worldwide, and it's being quickly like triaged and evaluated. And if necessary, that means that every like aircraft of the type of the whole fleet worldwide from all airline companies are grounded until the issue is resolved, or either they see, well, it's not like a general problem, but this for this plane specifically. So all planes are on board, and we have some are on the ground, and we have some examples of that, like for example with the Boeing 737 Max, which had two like catastrophic accidents, but as a result, they're still not really like flying yet. They're still in the testing phase, and hoping that they get their safety rating. So it's very aggressive, but necessarily so, because everybody understands the necessity of safety and the impact on aviation as a whole. If safety would be reduced and people started losing confidence, well, they wouldn't be flying as much anymore. People would be hesitant to start flying. So I grew up in the Air Force actually before I started in the IT and information security. So the first 8 years of my career were in air control. So a command and control within the Air Force, the Dutch Air Force, and I've learned like a lot on culture there, because well, once you're inside a culture, you don't tend to necessarily see it, or it's not explicit because it becomes normal for you. But as an outsider, if you look at like the defense industry or the military or the Air Force in this case, you will clearly see the culture there. And it's an interesting culture because it's very hierarchical, but also obviously very professional. Thankfully, safety is very important in the Air Force as well. But there's also lots of like training and exercise and more exercise and even more exercise. But also things like leadership is very important to be successful within the Air Force. And there you see like safety also being very prevalent, and it's also being like taught at leadership, and leadership teaches it to their people, and the employees are working at it amongst themselves. And in the Air Force, we had like a monthly magazine called Veilig Vliegen, which translates to safe flying. And the centerfold of that magazine, like a physical magazine, right? This was way like at early 2000, end of the 90s. So like a physical magazine, and the centerfold was a big poster of somebody within the Air Force. Could be a civilian, could be a military person, that did something that prevented something very, very safety risky, or improved risk in some shape or form. And they wanted to congratulate that with like a centerfold poster and thanking you why. And it was made very explicit why. So for example, you could have like somebody of the guard team of the Air Force base with their dogs, right? They're walking across the compound, and they find like a screw, like a large screw on the taxi track where planes like drive before they take off. And a screw could be sucked into an engine, and it could have like catastrophic consequences, because that plane could take off like with damage, or it could have problems taking off, or something could explode on the ground. So obviously that's very relevant, and they put that in the centerfold because obviously they want to congratulate people and thank them for working on safety, and also making it very clear, if you're working on safety, even if it's outside what your job requires of you, you're doing a good job. And we find that it's very, very important. Well, obviously There's also stuff that's not being like made explicit like that in the centerfold. For example, if two of these guys doing like dog fights and they come too close to each other in their training, and one loses visual, and that's a problem, because if you're close, you want to see each other. That's obviously when you get back to the ground. They state that even if it was your fault, you say it was my fault, this happened, and you evaluate it because you want to learn from it. That not necessarily reaches the center page of the Veilig Vliegen magazine, but it is being a lesson learned that's being shared with fellow airmen within the Air Force and even within NATO, if it's like a rare occasion that people should learn from. So safety also within the Air Force is very important. And it is important because obviously the risks are clear, and we want to prevent like death and hazard to people and stuff like that. Um, but for and if you're not like in the aviation industry, but for example in oil and fuel and stuff like that, for example, if you work for a company like Shell, safety is also pretty important, because if you look at this rig, you see, I don't know if you see my mouse pointer, but down at the left bottom here on the oil rig, you see like stairs, and obviously they're made to be used, so you walk up and down the stairs. And if you look at this weather, it looks pretty calm, blue skies, like calm seas. That's convenient. So the chances of you falling off are maybe small in this kind of weather, but it still could happen. But you fall in clear waters and low waves. So, the chances of survival are okay, I guess, if there's not too many sharks. But if it's like a 100-mile-per-hour winds and waves of 20 meters high and stuff like storm weather, if you then fall off the stairs, you have a big problem, because the chances you will be found are, pretty slim if it's like terrible weather. So this is why they teach you to always keep your hand on the guardrail. Not just on the oil rig, but if you go to the Shell headquarters in The Hague, for example, and you have like a meeting there, and you get like, if you arrive there, you get like a safety briefing of all the rules that are applying for safety. And one of those rules is keep your hand on the guardrail. But you're walking in this like office building in the middle of The Hague, right? So your host picks you up, and you walk the stairs to the second floor, and somebody comes down and sees you, and you don't have your hand on the guardrail. They say, you know what, you gotta put your hand on the guardrail, man, because it's safety here. And they stress it. They actually stress it. So they're enforcing that, and not because the stairs is necessarily at Shell in the headquarters is more dangerous than any other stairs in any other corporate building, but mainly because if you happen to find yourself on an oil rig like that, or working on a pipeline or whatever, then it has to be imprinted in your brain and automatic that you grab the guardrail. So they thought, we could teach every single individual that ever goes to our oil rig to grab the guardrail, or we'll just, force it in the company culture and explain people why and make sure that they challenge each other. And it kind of works. Also, if you were too late for the meeting and you're calling from within the car to say, I'm too late, let's do the meeting via phone while I'm driving, they say, well, you know what, you should park your car, because it's dangerous to drive and call, but yeah, it's allowed by the law. Yeah, we know it's allowed by the law, but our safety measures say safety first. So you either park your car or you hang up now. So they're very strict about that. Even though they're not aviation, they have clear safety risks. Well, that's enough about safety, because I've been talking about that for like 10 minutes now, but I'm trying to make a point here. The safety risks for people as in general are pretty clear, because we understand pain, we understand death, hazards. We don't want to get hurt, we don't want others to get hurt, so that's pretty clear. But understanding the security risks for example, information systems, or the value of information within a company, is way less understood by people. It's not tangible, it's nothing physical. It doesn't hurt if you lose like 20,000 personal details, for example. You don't bleed, you don't have to go to the hospital, you don't have to like go to the chiropractor to get fixed or stuff like that, or have your arm in a mold. You just lose it, and the pain is somewhere else, because money or stuff. So it's hard to make the risks understood, but there are still like physical risks to information security. For example, there was this power plant within Ukraine a couple of years ago that was attacked by allegedly Russian state actors, and they attacked the power plant and actually shut it down somewhere in December, and like hundreds of thousands of people were out of power in like December 20th, like freezing temperatures, and there was no power there. Obviously, there's like a safety risk there, because old people, if your house doesn't have any heating, there's a problem. You could get killed if you're cooking electric. no food. If you're driving your car and it's like a minus 10 degrees and the roads are slippery and the lights go out, that's like a safety hazard. So there's a relation between information security and safety. So it even went as far that the mechanics that had to fix like the power outage had to go into the building because remote was no longer possible with their flashlights, because inside the power plant the lights were also out. So they had to use the flashlights to find the switches that they could switch to turn the power back on. Well, obviously, we can understand that risks, but if you're like a bank or an insurance company or an airline, there's different risks than power outage. So if you look at the Netherlands, I'm pretty sure not everybody here in the call is from the Netherlands, but you may relate. So within the Netherlands, internet is like very important. We are one of the most connected countries in the world. And it even goes as far that like organizations like MasterCard, like the credit card organization, if they put like new online services out there, the Netherlands is one of the countries they test it on in, because we have so many connections to the internet. Everybody's connected. And if I look around my room, I think there's maybe like 6 or 7 devices that connect to the internet in my room alone, with phones and smart devices, which I tend to not really use, but also like laptops and stuff like that. So we are highly connected, and the value of our connection to the internet is also pretty high, because there's a lot of services out there that we use continuously, and those services make money by us using it. And commercial stuff like advertisements also, but also like I'm buying all my stuff online, especially now during the COVID time, because you don't go to stores anymore. I mean, I don't, hardly. Even the supermarket delivers it home. So all y'all in this call probably have some value with being connected to the internet and providing your services to the world via the internet. And that's where your value is. And we need to protect that money. Whereas if you look at like the military, for example, we as a country and also as NATO, we have like a team that protects our borders, like physically. And if you have like a physical store that sells stuff physically, well, there's like police walking the street and as a detergent, like preventing people to do anything harmful or stealing stuff. But if they do, they're there, you can call on them and they can come help protect you or respond to whatever has happened. But online, like your store doesn't have like a police force or an army protecting our borders, or like your store. It's kind of more or less the Wild West. You have to build the fence yourself, and and protect it. And if you don't do that well, obviously afterwards, hopefully you have some fallback measures like insurance or stuff like that. But it's not perfect, and you're never going to be happy about it. So you have to prevent that stuff yourself. Um, so this is pretty relevant. So if you look at the past a couple of years, so I started in like 2006, 2007, what I've seen is that security tends to be centralized. We made the decision like a while ago that it's a smart thing to do. And it was a smart thing to do because information security is a very specialized job. There's a lot of specialized stuff in there. For example, a pen tester, that's not something you learn by doing all IT jobs at the same time. It's a very specific mindset, a very specific skill set. And it takes a lot of time to become good at it. Same as like if you're in security operations, for example, monitoring of your IT landscape and detecting stuff, that's out of the ordinary and responding to that, so to make sure that nothing evil is happening. That's very, very specific. So naturally, you're going to centralize that because you get to get those people together. It's hard to get those skills, and they have to work together. But after some time, we find out that it's not sustainable, because if for example, your company is 10,000 people strong, then you have a IT security or a security team that could be like 20 people, 15 people, 40 people if you're lucky. But still, 40 people on a company of 10,000 people that work with information is a very small amount of people that you expect to look across, like these, what is it, groundhogs are doing, look across the organization and other people and trying to protect all that. That's like a very small resource of group of people that are protecting you. So what I see, the movement I see, is that this is kind of let go, not exactly let go. So you're not losing this, but what they say is, okay, well, information security has to be part of everybody's job in some shape or form, just as like safety is part of everybody's job if you're working in the aviation industry. And that doesn't mean that you have to do everything that's safety wise. So this doesn't mean that you have to do everything information security wise, just that which is relevant to your job. And security awareness has been trying to do that for years, but having like a yearly e-learning is not necessarily making you capable of understanding security within the context of your job. It takes a little bit more than just security awareness. But still, you would need like a centralized group of people that does security stuff, but no longer everything. right? So penetration testing, yeah, that's a smart thing to have like centralized because it can cover your whole organization. It just takes some time because 10 penetration penetration testers servicing an organization of 10,000 people means they cannot test your website or your product every week. There has to be a planning, so you have to cover up with another method to keep testing or control on a shorter feedback loop. Security operations also, but let's find out what is needed then for the rest of the organization. Well, it has to start with being risk aware and talking about risk and pointing at risks, like the centerfold of the Veilig Vliegen magazine. This guy or girl did something terrific for security. We have to be open to like comments or suggestions or feedback that we're doing something that is insecure. In this case, I would tell this guy, it's not really safe climbing up there. So to all of you getting vertigo from this picture, I'm sorry, I'll skip it in a minute. But from this picture, I would say, at least if you would go to do this, hook up to something that secures you, that you won't fall, because this is obviously a hazard. So, and I have an example for this, because a couple of years ago, I was working for a large insurance company, and I was working with a pen test team, not necessarily as a pen tester, but I was collaborating with them to improve stuff. And we found like an excellent security vulnerability within one of their systems. And I was getting really enthusiastic. And the guy that was pen testing also, because well, he was really good at it. He was a perfect reverse engineer. I'm sorry. So he found something terrific, and we were together. We were exploring it further. And well, it was an amazing finding, and I was getting enthusiastic. And we were not like in a room somewhere, but just in a big room where all security was working, but also like architects were there. It wasn't like a closed off space. So when I get enthusiastic, you may have noticed or may have not, but I tend to speak louder, and faster. And I'm happy about whatever we're doing. So I'm talking louder, louder, louder. And, we came to a conclusion, and that's that. And then I went to the coffee machine to get some coffee, because after a discussion, you need some drinks. And I walked to the coffee machine, and one of my colleagues, his name was Tom, and he stood up, and with like an intercept course, he intercepted me right before the door. And, he took me and said, Carlo, I got to talk to you, man. And he took me aside somewhere quiet, and he said, you were just talking about a active vulnerability within one of our systems. And I saw you getting enthusiastic, but man, you were literally screaming what it was and how it could be abused. And this is very sensitive information, man. So next time, please get a room somewhere and do it in private. And I was like, dude, you're totally right, man. This is so wrong for me. So thank you for correcting me. But please, the next time I do this, just say it in the room, shout it out loud. Carlo, you got to shut up because it's sensitive information. Get a room, because I welcome this. I welcome this feedback. It is good. And once you do it in the room, other people can learn from it without making the same mistake. And they can look at me, oh yeah, there you have Carlo again, right? So this is fine with me. Other people may not like that as much, but I am open to this feedback because it helps me get better. And I would want other people to learn from that as well. So, I have no problem with getting like put into that place. And this is culture, right? And I would want that culture within the whole company and everybody doing that. So pointing out risks to people and being open to receiving that feedback, should be like priority number one. And it can hurt, obviously, but not everybody is like it also means how do you provide the feedback is necessary. So communication skills are relevant, because if you just start cussing out somebody, it's not going to have any value. It has to be like positively done. So then, but on the other hand, if you do it correctly, and you get as a professional, you start focusing on security, there's something in it for you, because obviously if you're from a company perspective, you start talking about security, you're saying, well, these are our risks and these are our value, and you need to protect our interests as a company. And obviously, like professionals find that important, so they will work at that and help improve. If you're being explicit about why it is important for your company, why it is important for your customers and stuff like that, because it is important. There are reasons that it's important. But what I found out that really helps is that you also address the what's in it for me for your employees. So what's in it for them to start thinking. I'm sorry, I was on mute real quick. So what's in it for them if you start talking about security and building security culture in there? Well, what I have found that it's really good for your market value if you as a specialist start thinking about security and working with security. Not necessarily as a security specialist. Obviously it does, because I have like 20 recruitment mails a week. Just because I have security in my profile. But if as a for example, a software developer or an architect, or think of any role within your company that works with information. If you have security skills explicitly for that role in there, your market value will rise. People will find you interesting because everybody is looking for software developers that do secure software development. Everybody's looking for architects. Everybody's looking for managers that understand it. If you're a marketeer, it's even relevant. So if you have it in there, it's really good for your value on the market and your opportunities to get opportunities within the market. This is now. But I expect that within a couple of years, maybe 5 or 10 years, if you don't have those competences in your resume, you may find it hard to get a job, or you will find that your value on the job market will have reduced and your competition will be stronger because they have. So it's a good time to start focusing on what is relevant for your specific type of job. All right, so but then the question is, how do you go at it within a company to change like the culture? And well, that's not that easy. And obviously every company is different, but there are some things that you can work on. And the main thing for me is that you have to work at security being part of everything else and not as something separate. And with that, I mean is, okay, so we need to change the company culture, the company security culture, or have to build it. Well, let's make a security culture program. But you also have like a culture a program and a digital transformation program. I'm sorry. And maybe you also have a digital transformation program, and they're all talking to your employees about what's going on, how the company has to change, and what they have to take a look at and learn, and and if you come in there with another program that adds to that or comes adding new stuff to it, it becomes confusing, and security is probably the first one to be ignored. I'm sorry about that. To be ignored or skipped, because it is a topic out of bound for most people. It's not very well known. So what you need to do is start putting it in the other programs. So if you have a program that's teaching your employees about the core values of the organization, make sure you put security in there, and that you can translate the core values to security and the other way around. And if you have like a leadership program within your company, make sure you put security in there, that leaders understand what is expected from security and from the culture, and how they can improve it and help improve it and challenge their employees on that. If you have digital transformation, make sure that security is part of it and not something that's stuck on top on it once it becomes something as a separate program. Onboarding new people, same thing. Don't add security as a new program, but find a way to add to it. There's a catch, however. It's not easy to get it in there, because all those programs have a story to tell, and they probably not always like something new added to it, to the story they have to tell, especially if they don't really understand it yet. So here's where I for an I comes in. If you expect those programs to tell your security story has to include those programs. So what's in it for them? Well, security obviously is going to talk about digital transformation, about leadership, about all those kinds of the core values of the organization. It has to come from within the security team as well. They have to understand that in order for them to understand security, and it's called collaboration. You work together on it, and you put resources on that. So next up is identifying like influencers, because every company has perfect people, or at least like perfect or excellent professionals, but not everybody is an influencer. So you will have to look for that. And obviously, like the board, like the CEOs and CIO, CTOs, stuff like that, they are influencers because their decisions matter and are felt all across the organization. So that's top-down influencers. But you also have influencers from like the content or the profession. So for example, if you have like an architect that is really out there, outspoken about changing stuff, or working with specific standards, and everybody goes like, well, the solutions he came up with are excellent, and we start working with that person is an influencer. So you want to reach out to that person and help him get security in his storyline, but also help him with spreading his story about standards, or whatever that specific story is. It's the same thing. You want them to tell something about for you, but in return you tell something for them, and it should be related to each other. So and lastly, if you want to find out what is then what do we have, like the digital transformation, the leadership stuff, or the core values, those kinds of programs, you should reach out to your communication team. And hopefully if like an internal communication team, you should reach out to them and find out what kind of programs do we have. And obviously the big ones you should have heard about, so you should have found them, but maybe some are more like directed to a specific point within the organization. And if you're not there, you're not hearing about it. So if you're not a leader, you're not hearing about the leadership program. But your internal communication team should know what all the relevant programs are. So if you're going to look for them, start there and ask them, because they will probably know or know where you should ask. So next up, then, what do you need to start doing this? And in the Netherlands, we have like a saying that's the sheep with the five-legged sheep, the sheep with 5 legs, and it translates to a person or individual that has more skills in him or her that is humanly possible. So it doesn't exist. Well, obviously, you can see here a sheep with 5 legs exists, but you have to believe me, they are very rare. So you need a couple of skills to get this security culture going, and you should not expect them to be in a single person. If you're a company of 6 people, okay, you may have to improvise. But if you're 10,000 people strong, one person is not going to do it. So what are the kind of skills that you're looking for? Well, if I have to go into a company and have to address like the security culture, I look for four competences to start with. The first competence is somebody that makes sure that we can do stuff as a like changing the culture or addressing that. So like the icebreaker or the bridge builder, however you want to call it. So the he or she that goes into the company and enables the rest of the team to start doing stuff with the culture, like challenging stuff, changing stuff. Who opens the doors, gets support for management, gets support for whoever champions you need to get this done. So that's the icebreaker. That's the first role. The second role is to make sure that this group of people that you're getting together starts doing stuff like having a program and a project, so that makes sure that stuff can be done. It's more or less the project manager. So we make agreements about what deliverables we are doing, or the product owner, you can call it like that. Then the third kind of person is the person that makes sure that whatever we are doing is useful and the quality is good, because it's no use making deliverables as a culture change program where the deliverables are useless or the quality is crappy, because you can get attention once, and if you get that attention and you spoil it with coming up with like crappy content, it's going to be 2 or 3 times as hard to get the attention next time. So it has to be good right from the start. And the fourth role is the person that's going out there, like shouting, making a lot of noise about security, about the culture, about what the program is going to do, how we're adding to like other programs like leadership and stuff like that, what the results are, and how interesting it all is. So that's the storyteller and the marketeer, and you need those 4 roles together to start working on your first step in improving the security culture. Now, obviously, it's not going to stick with those 4 people, because you expect 10,000 people to start working differently in some shape or form. But this is your start. You need these 4 type of characters to make your first moves. Now, you don't necessarily need 4 people for it. Sometimes 3 is enough, because if I go into the company, if I look at my own profile within these 4 roles, I'm 1 and 4. I'm not really good at like structure and program management, or product ownership. I'm not that structured. Quality. Well, obviously there's other people that like to challenge me more than I can challenge other people on quality. But I am very explicit. I can make a lot of noise, and I am quite capable of going into an organization and enabling whatever we're trying to reach. So I like that. It's not always that I have those roles, because, for example, the assignment I am now in, there's an excellent leader that does role number 1 like perfectly. I don't need to bother with it. So that's fine. But it can be like 3 people. It can be 2 people. It cannot be 1 person, because it's too much. It can also be 5, 5, 6, 7. It depends on how much time and resources you can spend on it. So, but you need these kinds of roles. But that's not it. It's not 4 people that change everything. You need to reach out to a group of people. So the first thing I'm going to do, if I have found these people, is go through the organization and find out who has an affinity or interest in security. Even if you don't know anything about it but have an interest, I am interested in you, and I like to bring these people together, depending on how big the organization is, maybe in a small meeting or like a large seminar, and start talking to them about security, why it's interesting, start storytelling, and get them involved, because I want to have like a backbone as soon as possible. And with a backbone is like the 4 people I'm calling like the core team, and the backbone is a group of people with an interest in security or affinity, or already doing something with it, that I can ask questions to. What do you think of this? Or that if I have like a meeting or a presentation or a training or something that I'm developing, that I can get them together and pilot with them, or ask them to review something, or challenge me with some kinds of stuff, so that I can improve and make things better, and I get them involved. And the benefit is, if I go through the organization, I find maybe like 100 people. If you're a 10,000 strong company, I find 100 people, they will be spread throughout the organization. And within those 100 people, there will also be like 10 or 20 people that have an affinity for like spreading knowledge. And I would like to get them going at it as soon as possible. So help them, help them spread the knowledge within their own personal bubble within the organization and make noise. Look at these 4 guys working on culture. It's very interesting. Reach out to them. And that's where you have your momentum. You have your moment going. And that's the place where you want to be, because then you go from sending to an organization that culture has to change, that people and pieces of the organization start asking for it. Come to us. Can you give the training to us? We heard a lot about it. And that's the momentum you want. That's where your organization moves from telling people that they have to do security to people asking for, hey, can you come tell this story, because we think it's relevant. And that's the point where culture is starting to change. So, but then we have to think about, well, what about this story then? What it is about? Well, obviously you can choose for yourself what you want to talk about. But what I found really works is to focus on the threats to the organization. And they can be very diverse depending on the organization. Because if you're an airline company, you have other threats, other things that could go wrong by a willing attacker, or somebody does something to your organization intentionally. Where then if you're like an insurance company. So if I would focus on an airline, for example, it would be, I start with like telling the threats on a high level. So for example, deterioration of flight safety obviously is threat number 1, because safety is most important for a airline company. Or disruption of flight operations. So if you cannot fly anymore, you're not making any money. So you want to make sure that you prevent deterioration of flight operations. Those are very high level risks, and there's a couple. If you're an insurance company, disruption of flight operations obviously is not a threat, unless you're insuring like airline companies, but that's something different. But you would have to focus on, we're no longer the inability to sell insurance, or the inability to pay out. Those are high level threats. The way they can manifest within the organization are very diverse and very detailed. So if I stick to like flight operations, I hope everybody understands flight operations, like the capacity to fly and transport people from one place to the other. That's very important. So disruption of that would be very relevant. So I would start with making all those threats for the organization on a high level explicit, and talk to the board about it. Say, is this it? Is this it? Is what you would worry about, or is there something else? And make the list complete. Because once, if you have that list, you can go talk to people and I ask them, well, but how is this relevant for you? So for example, if you are working as a developer or an administrator on the flight planning product, well, obviously disruption of flight operations is something you should be concerned about, because if you cannot plan, you cannot fly. So you would have to ask those people, let's talk about how could it happen that your planning tool would no longer work? What are your dependencies? How would this threat manifest within your flight operations or flight planning program? And then you can start talking from within their context of what they're working on, based on the threat and how it could manifest, and what their interest in it is, what their questions about it is, what they've already done. And you can start having a dialogue and start telling a story about security within that context. So, but this is, well, it could be a big deal, because if the company is like very big and there's a lot of different competences, you would get, as a security professional telling stories, you would get to go in depth and understand those pieces of the organization. And this is where my conclusion comes from, changing the company culture or the security culture. It's not about the security team saying, well, you have to change, everybody has to change and understand security within the context of the organization. But it also means that if you're like the central security organization that's developing policies, policies are always very high level. If you want to go from policy to practical, there's a couple of steps in between. And if you're just pushing policies, well, obviously you're not going to make it specific for people on the floor, right? So the culture change is also that for example, security officer, if you want to make software developers get like security culture, get to grips with that and act on it, you would have to start understanding software development, and not software development as it was done like 15 or 20 years ago, but how it's done now and how it's going to be done in 5 years, where we're moving towards. Because if you don't understand that, you're not going to be able to tell about security and the threats within the context of those software developers in a way that is relevant for you. So cultural change, it's not just the rest of the organization, it's always also the security team. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Super cool sprint. Deep dive sprint, actually. That was some valuable information, Carlo. Wow. I'm digesting. I love the visual approach because for me that works. Um, good. Yeah, let's dive into the Q&A. I had some in between comments already about the airlines. Lars mentions that it's also economical damage is if a whole line of specific model is grounded.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and he also mentioned that with regards to the Oli platform,
Yeah, Oreg.
also applicable in most offices within the construction world as a result.
Yes, yes.
It's also you see a lot of security measures. All
Safety.
right, on to the Q&A. We've got some questions coming in. Rogier, he asked, I believe in a bottom-up approach, but within a larger existing company, this is more challenging or at least
Yes.
will take longer. What's your opinion on make security a company value so you have a company-wide reference to address the change?
Yeah, you are okay. Well, it's going to be hard making a security a company value unless you're like a security company because it's security is nothing in itself, but it's part of everything. This is why I would rather have security become part of the existing company values, like make it explicitly part of that, instead of make it in a new company value because it will stay something outside the rest and it has to be in it. However, I would like to remark on the bottom-up approach. I also like the bottom-up approach, but I also like the top-down approach because I call it like the pincer maneuver, like classic military. You know the opponent, you approach it from two sides and make them stuck and do a crossfire. I like that because you cannot do the bottom-up approach only. You do have to do both. And at some point, if you do both, you will reach a point that both bottom-up and top-down run into and cannot progress anymore. And then you will have found your bottleneck that you can attack from both sides.
Good. Lorenzo, he asked, where to get the security skills from the management or the leadership point of view. I have some basic understanding, but I'm not a Linux expert or penetration tester and my role is not development. Are there any introduction overview certifications? Came to the right
Wow, that's a
address.
good question, and I would really reach out to Xibia Academy for that because I'm a security guy and not the training guy. But yes, obviously there are introduction trainings very much. For example, we have like a DevOps for CISO or security for board members training where you get like the abstract, like the high level view of stuff. So, but if you're like the CEO of a 20,000 person organization, it doesn't really it's not really necessary to learn Linux skills. However, it would be totally awesome for the Linux guys if the CEO walks in there and says, you know what, teach me, that would be cool. But it's, you would skip on like 99% of the rest of the company. So it depends on your position. But yes, there's a lot of training in there. But I would recommend, depending on your position or, your technical skills, go to conferences. If there's like if your company is working on Amazon cloud, go to AWS conferences because usually there's also like leadership programs there, and it goes for security as well. So security and training and conferences are not always about like the technical lead nerds. And I say that like as a compliment. Nerd is a good word, but it's also for everybody, right? So also for leadership. So just reach out to the community, and I'm sure you will be helped.
Good. And I'll also let somebody from our Academy advisors contact you, Lorenzo, if that's okay, just for orientating conversation. On to Robin. What are the most innovative events you have seen to improve the security culture within a company? I was
Oh, well, it's
also
not
going to
really
ask that one.
innovative. What I've seen, I'm sorry. So it's not really innovative, but I have seen like very excellent security guild structures and security champions. And it's nothing new because champions and guilds and chapters and stuff like that has been around for long. And using that for security, is just okay. But you have to be capable at building guilds and building chapters, and your organization has to be up to it. So what I mean with that is, I have not been at an organization where security is the initiator of like guild structures or chapters where it has been successful. But if you have an organization where chapters and guilds are very prominent and very effective, then building a security chapter, um, is something you should do because obviously the organization is ready for it. So once again, I say look at what your company is good at and use that. I think that's the innovation, and not let's do something completely different from the rest of the organization for security. On the other hand, there's stuff that's innovative that you can impress with, but that's like doing cool seminars or cool activities within your organization to make security visible, like uh, uh, um, uh, online or within the organization, creating cool seminars, doing learning to hack activities for people completely not in the technical roles. So you get them involved in technology, because learning technology is fun in how it works. But if you have to learn technology by breaking something, I find personally that more interesting. But I don't think it's interesting, but it does work. Oh, sorry, I don't think it's innovative, but it does work.
Right, on to Ellen. Do you make a difference in the approach for IT? Oh, I just lost the question there. Do you make a difference in the approach for IT and non-IT people?
Yeah, absolutely. And the difference in approaches within IT people, I tend to reach out to the non-IT parts of security and get them in touch with those, get the IT people in contact with IT people and have discussions. And the other way around, exactly the same. If you have non-IT people, I want them to understand IT a little bit better. So if you're, for example, one person in the non-IT part, security officer or compliance or something like that, I say, come on, let's discover DevOps, how it works and how it's not the same as software development 10 years ago, and how you can adapt to it. Because if you don't understand it, you're probably not going to make a lot of impact trying to get something from it. So yeah.
So here
Oh, hang
is,
on, one
oh,
moment though. So, but I try to avoid very technical talk and jargon with non-IT people, and up to the point that they start understanding it. So yeah.
yeah, you're clearly good at building bridges between those. Lars asked a question. Carlo, mate, how would you approach this within a project-driven organization where almost every decision is a responsibility of the project leader?
That's a good question, but obviously, I don't know if there's like a training program or a selection process for the project leader, but at least I would start with like a knowledge exchange program. So regular a knowledge exchange stuff. So all project leaders come together, and preferably not just the project leaders, but everybody they work with that have an interest, and start sharing knowledge about security. So get them all in a room, get them interested, and have good people speaking, and get them interested in security. And once their interest is peaked, together with them, find out what is relevant for them and work on that. But I think collaboration is even if you have all separate projects, what you definitely don't want is that every project leader has to discover the wheel for himself. So I would like have them get together and establish a way of building security into their way of project management.
Question from Robin. How do you make sure security gets the proper attention when starting a new project, especially when it's supplier customer relationship with commercial interests? Especially when it is a supplier customer relationship with commercial interest.
Okay, please repeat the question once more.
Okay. How do you make sure security gets the proper attention when starting a new project,
Okay,
especially
yeah. Okay, I get it. So yeah, well, it's the same thing again. Security has to be part of everything, and if it's not, if you, what you should definitely not do is start making like checklists. That if you start with something, you have to follow the checklist. Because that's, people do checklist once or twice, and then it's finished. Checklists should only be in place for if you have to be remembered about it in very critical moments, like where you have no time to think about what should I do, then you have a checklist, right? So if you bore people with that, don't do that. But what you should do is make sure that the organization knows that it's important. So business should ask for security, customers should ask for security, but if it's external customers within your organization, that not necessarily always happens, but the business part should have their customers' interest in mind, which is also security. What it is exactly, it depends on the organization. I don't have the context, but the business should ask for it. Leadership should say that security is important, so it has to become front of mind. And with all that said, you should have a clear approach. for how do you do security within your product development. I'm assuming that it's product development. So if you're developing software, you should have a secure software development process or program that is fitting with your way of working. And by making it fitting and easy and practical, it will be more interested, more easy to implement than if you put it as a burden on top of everything else. That is exactly what you don't want to do.
Robin adds to it, the context is a digital agency that develops platforms for customers.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe I think you have my details. If you want to get more specific, just reach out, because this is also there's a lot of digital agencies building platforms.
Good. We've got another one from Lars. What tips do you have to take into account the company identity culture, where there is a lot of resistance towards security?
Yeah, well, I would like to find out why that resistance is there. Is it because it's more work, or because it's not interesting, or because we don't have any risks? I'm not saying there aren't any risks, but there can be like the perception that there aren't any risks. So yeah, I think the only thing you can do is talk about it and find out, what the problem is. On the other hand, like what always works is like a huge incident, but this is exactly what you would like to prevent, right? So you want to be ahead of this. But yeah, truth be told, 9 out of 10 times you need something bad to happen first, because before you're being listened to. But
Yeah,
sometimes you can initiate the bad things yourself, right? So not having an actual incident, but having like a penetration test or a red team show that, well, I could just get into your company and get become domain admin and steal all your secrets, right? So yeah.
Lars adds a couple of things. He said mostly a client will not pay for it, so he adds to the urgency. And the other thing is, and then a quote: "We airgape it. Why bother? We airgape it. Why bother?"
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I cannot answer on the last one.
No, me
I don't
neither.
know the system architecture, but the first one, clients not asking for it. Well, hardly any clients ever ask for it.
Paying for it.
Or
He
are
said.
paying for it, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you use your insurance company, you're not asking for a secure product as a client. I think
No.
like 99.9% of Dutch people aren't even thinking about it until it goes wrong,
Yeah.
and then the world's ablaze. So it's not that's just it doesn't really matter if your client pay for it or ask for it. The question is, do they need it? And you as a business should be able to determine that, because they're not going to ask for it until it's too late.
Here's one from Bus. How do you know you reached the point of having security as part of your company culture? Or maybe it is asking this question that you haven't reached that point yet.
Yeah, well, maybe you're never done. And the reason that you're never done is because it keeps on changing, right? But you can reach a point where it's mature enough to be able to, handle change, right? So, and I think it's really hard. It's really hard to measure or to make smart. But once your findings go down in the product development, and once your software developers or architects start talking on congresses about how security is going, and once you as a security professional get challenged by like other employees about, well, you came up with that, but we think it's wrong, because then you at least you're on the right way. So yeah, culture is a difficult thing to measure, because it's people and the way they act, and there's no like Excel sheet with graphs and numbers that determines like character, and so that's difficult. So you can only determine it by being in your company, taking an interest, talking to people, reaching out and finding out how they're doing.
Good. Thanks for your questions. We've got a
Yeah, great
last one,
question.
and I think we're gonna round things up afterwards. So have a question from Henry. To change behavior of your company, it is not only telling team what to do and an e-learning to do in an e-learning. People also must be able to act and want to change. How do you really change behavior?
Yeah, well, that is very dependent. So you have to have like some sensitivity for people, because one person has needs another motivation to change than another. But at least what the single most important thing is that from within the organization, the noise is made that it is important from all levels. So if your board says, yeah, whatever, man, I don't really care, you're lost. It's not going to work. Then you have to focus on them first to get them working. Because if regularly like your C-level is talking about security and saying how important it is, then at least people will take an interest, or at least recognize that other people may find it important, and then you can start working on it. So this is what I mean with these influencers. Obviously the board are influencers, but there are like specialist influencers as well. These are the people you want to reach out for, because influencers, if they start saying something, they influence people. This is why they're there. This is also why influencers or YouTube are selling like products, because they influence people to buy stuff which you may not really want at all, you know. So these are the people that you have to look out for. You cannot do it by yourself, but you need help, and this is where you look for.
Okay. Well, Lars, I'll give you this last one. We need to round things up, but Lars pinned down another one. On a personal note, Carlo, we work together. I've seen you in action at the insurance company
Right.
since your time then and
Two
now.
times.
What would you say is the golden tip with regard to start security culture from the ground up?
Well, I think I kind of did that with the sheep with 5 legs. Like, look for those 4 competences that you can collaborate with. You know, with the people that, you know, builds bridges, opens doors, the project lead, stuff like that. You know, and get them together and build a plan, and then come up with material and a way to find people, the rest of the organization, that also have an interest. And, you know, start communicating and start getting them together. That's your first step. You know, you need people to change people.
Awesome last quote. Good
Thanks.
energy, man. If it were to up to you, then any company would immediately start building
I would
security
hope so.
culture.
Yes.
Yeah. I saw a very relevant addition from Dave in the chat. He says we are working on creating a white paper on the topic of setting up security culture. There is no confirmed estimate time of delivery, but we'll blog about it when it's done. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah.
Carlo, thank you so much, man, for this excellent talk.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for your interest and the excellent questions. I had fun this hour.
Yeah, it's a very valuable Q&A. And thank you for asking your questions. We hope, besides the excellent talk from Carlo, we added some more value in answering the questions. We will make this recording available. You will be notified as soon as possible. Just allow us some time to digest a full week of webinars. That will take a little bit longer. You'll get a message about it, and please also check out the XCB Academy community. That's where you find the Zoom link, the area where all the webinars are collected now. There's loads of security content there already, and challenge yourself to pin down a question if you have some. There are Carlo wanders around there, Dave, and all his colleagues. Don't underestimate the wisdom of the crowd. So if you have a question, pin it down there. Somebody might answer, and if not, I will make sure somebody answers. And for the rest, also, as mentioned before, please check out Xebia Academy. You can go to xebia.com/academy, and you see the whole calendar plan of all the security trainings we have for 2021, the next year. And we definitely also hope to see you in person again soon. That's eventually the basis and the fundament of good culture, right? Thanks all for attending, and hopefully see you again soon.
All right. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.